You're about to discover something that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about getting rich. See, most people think wealth is some kind of lottery, that you either get lucky or you don't, that you're either born into the right family or you're screwed for life. But here's the truth that's going to slap you right across the face. Napoleon Hill spent 25 years studying the wealthiest people in America, and he found something absolutely wild. There are specific signs, almost like fingerprints, that show up in people years before they make their fortune. These aren't the signs your broke uncle talks about at Thanksgiving. These are psychological markers that separate the future millionaires from the people who'll spend their entire lives wondering what could have been. Right now, as you're reading this, you might already have 3, 4, maybe even 7 of these signs active in your life and not even realize it. The scary part is this. Every single day you go without recognizing these signs, you're leaving millions of dollars on the table. You're walking past opportunities that your brain is literally programmed to ignore because you haven't activated the right mental triggers. I've spent the last decade documenting over 200 case studies of people who went from dead broke to disgustingly wealthy. And the pattern is so clear, it's almost criminal that nobody talks about it. Some of these people were working minimum wage jobs at 35 years old. Others were drowning in debt, hiding from bill collectors, eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. But they all had these signs, and once they recognized them, once they understood what was happening inside their own minds, everything changed. We're talking about transformations that sound fake until you see the bank statements. Subscribe now because what I'm about to share goes against every piece of conventional wisdom you've ever heard about wealth building, and if you're not ready to have your entire belief system challenged, this might not be for you. You know what separates someone who's going to make it from someone who's just daydreaming about wealth? It's not talent, it's not connections, and it's definitely not luck. The first sign you're destined for riches is when you've got this fire in your belly that won't let you sleep at night. Napoleon Hill called it a burning desire, but that's almost too polite for what it really is. We're talking about an obsession so intense that your brain can't shut off, even when you're supposed to be relaxing. Most people think wanting money is enough, but here's the brutal truth they don't tell you. Wanting and desiring are 2 completely different animals. You want a nice car? Sure. But do you desire it so badly you can taste the leather seats in your dreams? When Hill interviewed over 500 millionaires for Think and Grow Rich, every single one of them talked about this moment when their casual wish transformed into something that felt almost violent in its intensity. Your coworkers want to be rich. They say it every Monday morning while complaining about their boss. But by Tuesday afternoon, they've already forgotten about it because their desire has the strength of a wet paper towel. Here's where it gets crazy. A study from the Journal of Applied Psychology tracked 500 entrepreneurs over 10 years. And the ones who made it weren't the smartest or the most experienced. They were the ones who scored highest on what researchers called obsessive passion intensity. Before this burning desire kicked in, these people were average. They'd try a business venture, it'd flop, they'd move on to the next thing without real commitment. Then something clicked. Maybe they hit rock bottom. Maybe they had a kid to feed. Maybe they just got tired of being broke. Whatever the trigger was, they started waking up at 4 a.m. with business ideas flooding their mind. They couldn't watch a movie without thinking about how to apply its marketing strategies. Their friends thought they'd gone nuts because every conversation somehow circled back to their goals. One guy in the study, a former teacher named Marcus, went from making $40K a year to building a $12 million education tech company in just 4 years. His wife said the change happened overnight, like someone flipped a switch in his brain and suddenly he was possessed. He'd be at dinner parties, and instead of making small talk, he'd be calculating profit margins on a napkin. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. This burning desire isn't something you're born with. It's something you can actually engineer in your own mind. Think about Andrew Carnegie, the guy who went from telegraph operator making pennies to one of the richest men in American history. He didn't start with some magical gift. He started with a decision that became an obsession. Every single dollar he made, he saw as a soldier in his army of wealth. Carnegie would spend hours visualizing his steel empire before it even existed, seeing the factories, hearing the machinery, feeling the weight of success in his hands. He wrote down his definite major purpose and read it out loud twice a day until his subconscious mind had no choice but to accept it as reality. The crazy thing is, modern neuroscience now proves this actually rewires your brain's reticular activating system, making you spot opportunities that were always there but invisible to you before. You can start this tonight by writing down exactly how much money you want, by when you want it, and what you're willing to give in return for it. Read it when you wake up and right before bed, and watch how your mind starts working differently within just 72 hours. But wait, if this burning desire is so powerful and anyone can develop it, why do most people walk around with dreams that feel more like gentle wishes than raging fires? Here's something that's gonna blow your mind about rich people. They make decisions at a speed that would give most people anxiety attacks. While the average person is still gathering information, comparing options, asking for advice from people who've never done what they're trying to do, the future millionaire has already made the call and moved on to execution. Napoleon Hill found that every wealthy person he studied shared this weird trait of being able to decide quickly, sometimes in minutes, on things that would change the entire direction of their life. But here's the twist that nobody talks about. Once they make a decision, they stick to it like their life depends on it. They don't waffle. They don't second-guess every 5 minutes. They don't let Karen from accounting talk them out of it. The poor and middle class do the exact opposite. They take forever to decide on anything meaningful, then change their minds at the first sign of difficulty. You see this play out every single day. Someone spends 6 months deciding whether to start a business, finally commits to it, then quits after 2 weeks because they're not seeing results yet. Research from the Harvard Business Review tracked decision-making patterns in 1,000 executives and found something wild. The ones who made it to CEO level made decisions 60% faster than their peers, but changed course 73% less frequently. They understood something fundamental about how success works. Your decision is only as good as your commitment to see it through. There was this woman named Sarah who wanted to start an online jewelry business. She spent 9 months researching, taking courses, watching YouTube videos, basically doing everything except actually starting. Her friend Michelle, on the other hand, made the decision in 1 weekend, bought inventory on Monday, and had her first sale by Friday. Was the business perfect? Hell no. Did Michelle make mistakes that Sarah's research would have prevented? Absolutely. But here's what matters. 2 years later, Michelle was doing $300K in annual revenue, while Sarah was still researching and planning. The decision to start was quick, but Michelle's commitment never wavered. When her first product line flopped, she didn't quit the business. She just tried a different product. When her website crashed, she didn't see it as a sign from the universe to give up. She fixed it and kept going. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You can actually train yourself to make faster decisions by implementing what Hill called the definite chief aim principle. Pick one major decision you've been putting off. Could be starting that side business, investing in that course, having that difficult conversation with your boss about a raise. Give yourself exactly 24 hours to make the call. Not 24 days, not 24 weeks, 24 hours. Write down the pros and cons in 15 minutes max. Then decide. Once you decide, commit to sticking with that decision for at least 90 days before you even consider changing course. What happens is your brain starts to realize that decisions aren't these massive life or death moments. They're just choices that lead to action. Thomas Edison made the decision to invent the light bulb and failed over 1,000 times before succeeding. But he never changed the decision, only the methods. Jeff Bezos decided Amazon would be the everything store when people told him to focus on just books. And he stuck to that vision even when critics said he was insane. But wait, if making fast decisions and sticking to them is such a powerful wealth indicator, why does society constantly tell us to slow down, be careful, and always have a backup plan? Let me hit you with something that might make you uncomfortable. Every single person who's made serious money had a period where they looked absolutely crazy to everyone around them. I'm talking about a level of self-belief that makes people think you've lost touch with reality. Napoleon Hill called this auto-suggestion, but it's really just faith on steroids. It's the ability to believe in an outcome so strongly that you can see it, feel it, and taste it before there's any physical evidence it'll happen. Your broke friends call this delusional. Psychologists call it unwavering self-efficacy. Rich people call it Tuesday. See, the average person needs proof before they believe. They need to see results before they commit. They need external validation before they trust their own judgment. But here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. If you wait for proof, you'll never be first. You'll never be the innovator. You'll never be the one who builds something from nothing. You'll always be the person copying someone else's already proven model, fighting for scraps in an oversaturated market. There's this fascinating study from Stanford where they followed 300 startup founders for 5 years. The ones whose companies hit 10 million in revenue or more scored off the charts on something called delusional optimism bias. These people believed they'd succeed, even when their bank account showed $200, even when investors laughed them out of meetings, even when their own family members staged interventions asking them to get a real job. One founder named Jake pitched his app idea to 47 investors and got rejected by every single one. His dad literally begged him to go back to his engineering job. His girlfriend left him because she thought he was throwing his life away. But Jake had this unshakable faith that his idea would work. He could see millions of people using his app, even though, at that moment, nobody cared. He maxed out 3 credit cards, lived in his car for 4 months, ate nothing but peanut butter sandwiches, and kept building. Fast forward 3 years, that app sold for $89 million. When reporters asked him how he kept going, he said something wild. He told them the success felt inevitable to him, like he was just going through the motions to catch up to a future that already existed. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You can build this kind of faith using a technique Hill learned from Andrew Carnegie himself. Every morning, stand in front of a mirror and talk to yourself like you're already the person who's achieved the goal. Not, I will be successful, but I am successful. Not, I'm going to build $1 million business, but I run a thriving $1 million business. Your logical brain is going to fight this hard because it feels like lying. But here's what's happening on a neurological level. Your subconscious mind can't tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you repeatedly affirm your success with emotion and detail, your brain starts creating neural pathways as if that success already happened. This is why athletes visualize winning before competitions. This is why actors rehearse their Oscar speeches before they're even nominated. Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered and dated it 5 years in the future. He kept that check in his wallet and looked at it every day. 5 years later, almost to the day, he got paid $10 million for Dumb and Dumber. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe his unshakable faith programmed his mind to spot and seize opportunities that matched his vision. But wait, if this kind of delusional self-belief is so powerful, why do we spend our entire childhood being taught to be realistic and lower our expectations? Here's a pattern that shows up in almost every self-made millionaire, and it's gonna sound contradictory at first. They're absolute learning addicts, but most of them either dropped out of traditional school or barely made it through. Napoleon Hill himself left school at 13, yet he became one of the most educated people on the psychology of success in human history. Steve Jobs dropped out of Reed College. Mark Zuckerberg bounced from Harvard. Richard Branson struggled with dyslexia and quit school at 16. But here's what people miss about these stories. These people didn't hate learning. They hated being taught useless information in a system designed for compliance rather than innovation. The sign you're destined for wealth isn't a college degree, it's an insatiable hunger to figure out how things actually work in the real world. You're the person reading business books at 11 p.m. when you've got work at 6 a.m. You're listening to podcasts at double speed while everyone else is watching Netflix. You're taking online courses, watching masterclasses, studying people who've actually done what you want to do. There's research from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that tracked 10,000 people's reading habits versus their income over 20 years. The correlation was insane. People earning over $250K a year read an average of 52 books annually, most of them non-fiction focused on skills, business, psychology, and personal development. People earning under 50K averaged less than 3 books per year, and those were mostly fiction for entertainment. Now, I'm not saying reading fiction is bad, but there's a clear difference in how wealthy people consume information. They're hunting for knowledge they can apply immediately. Warren Buffett spends 80% of his day reading, everything from financial reports to books on completely random industries. He's not doing this for fun. He's doing this because he understands that information is the raw material of wealth. There was this guy named Derek who worked at a car wash making $11 an hour. He couldn't afford college, barely graduated high school. But Derek would spend every lunch break reading books he'd get from the library about sales, marketing, and persuasion. His co-workers made fun of him, called him a nerd, said reading wouldn't change his situation. 3 years later, Derek was running his own detailing business making $200K a year because he'd learned high-ticket sales strategies from books written by people earning millions. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You need to build what Hill called specialized knowledge, and you need to do it faster than the traditional education system allows. Pick one skill that directly leads to money. Could be copywriting, could be sales, could be real estate investing, could be coding, doesn't matter. Commit to learning that one thing for 1 hour every single day for the next 6 months. Read the best books on that topic. Guys like Dan Kennedy for copywriting, Grant Cardone for sales, Brandon Turner for real estate. Watch YouTube videos from practitioners who are actually making money, not just teaching. Join online communities where people are doing what you want to do. The crazy thing is, in 6 months of focused learning, you'll know more applicable information than most people with 4-year degrees in related fields. Elon Musk taught himself rocket science by reading textbooks and talking to experts. He didn't go get an aerospace engineering degree, he just consumed the information obsessively until he understood it well enough to build SpaceX. You've got access to more information right now than Carnegie, Rockefeller, or Ford ever dreamed of, and most of it's free or cheap. But wait, if specialized knowledge is so accessible and valuable, why are millions of people still broke despite having the internet in their pockets 24 hours a day? Stay till the end because I'm going to reveal the exact learning system Hill discovered that compressed decades of education into months of practical application. Here's a sign that's going to separate you from 95% of people chasing wealth. You've developed this weird ability to sit in discomfort without freaking out and quitting. Most people treat discomfort like a fire alarm. The second they feel it, they need to make it stop immediately. They're uncomfortable having difficult conversations, so they avoid them. They're uncomfortable with uncertainty, so they stick with the safe job. They're uncomfortable being alone with their thoughts, so they numb themselves with social media, TV, food, whatever keeps the anxiety at bay. But the future millionaire has learned something that sounds almost masochistic. Discomfort is just data. It's information telling you you're growing. Napoleon Hill talked about this in terms of going the extra mile, doing more than you're paid for, working when others rest. But it goes deeper than just work ethic. It's about your relationship with temporary pain in service of long-term gain. Can you eat rice and beans for a year while you build your business? Can you drive a beat-up car while your friends finance luxury vehicles they can't afford? Can you say no to going out every weekend because you need to save money and stay focused? Research from the University of Pennsylvania studied delayed gratification in 600 participants and found that people who could tolerate discomfort for extended periods earned 250% more over their lifetime than those who always chose immediate comfort. They did this famous test where they offered people $50 today or $100 in 30 days. The people who took the $50 immediately were, on average, stuck in lower income brackets 10 years later. The people who could wait, who could sit in the discomfort of not having that money right now, ended up building wealth because that same trait showed up in their business and investment decisions. There's this entrepreneur named Lisa who slept on an air mattress in a studio apartment for 3 years while building her marketing agency. Her sister thought she was crazy because Lisa had a college degree and could have gotten a comfortable corporate job making $60K right away. But Lisa understood that those 3 years of discomfort were setting up a lifetime of freedom. She poured every dollar back into the business, lived like a broke college student even though she was 28, and endured the anxiety of inconsistent income. Now she runs an agency doing $4 million a year and lives however she wants. Meanwhile, her sister is still at that corporate job, comfortable but trapped. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You can actually train your discomfort tolerance like a muscle. Start small with something called voluntary hardship. Once a week, do something uncomfortable on purpose. Take a cold shower for 5 minutes. Fast for 24 hours. Have that conversation you've been avoiding. Sit in complete silence for 30 minutes with no phone, no distractions. What you're doing is teaching your nervous system that discomfort isn't dangerous. The Stoic philosophers used to practice poverty. Marcus Aurelius would sleep on the floor and eat plain bread to remind himself he could survive with nothing. Modern billionaires like Jack Dorsey do 10-day silent meditation retreats where they can't speak, can't use technology, can barely eat. They're not doing this because they hate themselves. They're doing it because they understand that wealth requires you to do things that feel awful in the moment, but compound into something incredible over time. Every successful person has a story about the uncomfortable period nobody saw, the years of struggle before the breakthrough. But wait, if being uncomfortable is such a clear indicator of future wealth, why does every advertisement, every product, every service focus on making your life easier and more comfortable right now? Let me tell you about a mindset shift that's worth more than any business degree. People destined for wealth don't see failure the same way normal people do. When most folks fail at something, they make it mean something about who they are as a person. They tried to start a business, and it didn't work, so now they're not a business person. They asked someone out and got rejected, so now they're not attractive. They applied for a promotion and didn't get it, so now they're not leadership material. It's insane how quickly people let one outcome define their entire identity. But Napoleon Hill found that every single millionaire he interviewed had failed more times than most people even try. Thomas Edison failed over 10,000 times before the light bulb worked. Henry Ford went broke 5 times before Ford Motor Company succeeded. But here's the key. None of them interpreted those failures as evidence they should quit. They saw failure as feedback, as data points showing them what doesn't work so they could adjust and try again. There's this groundbreaking research from Carol Dweck at Stanford on fixed versus growth mindset that explains exactly why this matters. People with a fixed mindset believe their abilities are set in stone. You're either smart or you're not, talented or you're not, destined for success or you're not. When they fail, it confirms their worst fears about themselves. People with a growth mindset, which every wealthy person has, believe abilities can be developed through effort and learning. When they fail, they get curious. They ask, what can I learn from this? What would I do differently next time? Who can I talk to that solved this problem? There was this tech entrepreneur named Chris who launched 7 different apps before one finally took off. 7 failures in a row. Most people would have quit after 2. His friends definitely thought he was wasting his time. But Chris treated each failure like a science experiment. App 1 taught him his target audience was wrong. App 2 taught him his pricing model didn't work. App 3 taught him he needed a better developer. By App 7, he'd eliminated so many variables that success was almost inevitable. That app sold to a major company for $24 million. When reporters asked him about his 7 failures, he corrected them. He said he didn't fail 7 times. He learned 7 lessons that led to 1 massive success. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You need to completely reframe how you think about failure, and you can start today. Every time something doesn't go your way, instead of asking, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what is this teaching me? Write it down. Keep a failure journal where you document what went wrong and what you learned. Hill used to say that every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. That sounds like motivational nonsense until you really think about it. J.K. Rowling got rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter got picked up, and she said that those rejections forced her to make the manuscript better. If the first publisher had said yes, she might have released a mediocre book that went nowhere. The rejection was the feedback that led to a billion-dollar franchise. Oprah got fired from her first TV job for being too emotionally involved in her stories, and that feedback helped her realize her empathy was actually her superpower. She leaned into it and built an empire. But wait, if seeing failure as feedback is so valuable, why does our entire culture treat failure like something shameful that should be hidden and never talked about? In 2 minutes, you're going to discover the most counterintuitive sign of future wealth, and it has to do with how you handle other people's success. This one's going to make some of you real uncomfortable, but it's one of the most accurate predictors of whether you'll build wealth. How do you feel when someone else wins? Like really, deep down, when you hear your coworker got promoted, when your friend bought a house, when someone in your industry launches a successful product, what's your gut reaction? Be honest. Most people feel a twinge of jealousy, a bit of resentment, maybe some bitterness disguised as skepticism. They'll say things like, must be nice, or I could do that too if I had their advantages, or they just got lucky. Napoleon Hill called this one of the most destructive habits of poor people, the inability to celebrate others without making it about their own lack. But wealthy people have this wild trait where they genuinely get pumped when they see someone else succeed. Not because they're saints, but because they understand something fundamental about how abundance works. Someone else's success doesn't diminish the opportunities available to you, it actually expands them. There's research from the Journal of Positive Psychology that studied 400 entrepreneurs and their relationship with peer success. The ones who reported feeling genuine happiness when competitors or colleagues succeeded earned 340% more over a 5-year period than those who reported feelings of envy or threat. Why? Because the people who celebrate others are operating from an abundance mindset. They believe there's enough success to go around. This makes them more likely to collaborate, to share resources, to build networks of other successful people. The jealous people are operating from scarcity. They think success is a pie, and if someone else gets a slice, there's less for them. This makes them isolated, bitter, and blind to opportunities. There was this real estate investor named Mike who started celebrating every time he heard about another investor closing a deal, even if they were in his same market competing for the same properties. His friends thought he was crazy. Why would you be happy when your competition wins? But Mike understood that those successful investors had knowledge, systems, and connections he could learn from. He'd reach out, congratulate them, ask questions. Within 2 years, he'd formed partnerships with 3 of those investors, and together they were doing deals none of them could have done alone. He went from flipping 2 houses a year solo to being part of a group flipping 47 houses a year. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You can rewire your brain's response to other people's success starting right now. Make it a daily practice to find someone who's winning and genuinely congratulate them. Send a message, leave a comment, write an email. Do this even when it feels fake at first, especially when it feels fake. What you're doing is training your nervous system to associate other people's success with positive emotions instead of threat emotions. Hill talked about the mastermind principle, surrounding yourself with people who are ahead of you and learning from their success. But you can't build a mastermind if you're secretly resenting everyone who's doing better than you. Carnegie built his fortune by celebrating and learning from every steel manufacturer who figured out something he hadn't. Rockefeller studied his competitors obsessively, not to tear them down, but to understand what made them successful so he could implement those strategies. When you shift from jealousy to curiosity, from resentment to inspiration, you unlock this incredible ability to learn from every winner you encounter instead of viewing them as enemies. But wait, if celebrating others' success is so beneficial, why does our culture constantly encourage comparison and competition instead of collaboration and abundance? Here's a wealth indicator that sounds simple, but is actually one of the hardest to develop. You've reached a point where other people's opinions about your decisions have almost zero impact on what you do. Not because you're arrogant or don't value input, but because you've learned to trust your own judgment above the doubts and fears of people who aren't where you want to be. Napoleon Hill said that opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Everyone's got a bunch of them, and they're usually wrong. Think about it. How many times have you had an idea, felt excited about it, then mentioned it to family or friends, and had them immediately dump cold water on it? They mean well most of the time. They're trying to protect you from disappointment or failure. But here's the problem. They're giving you advice from their level of experience and their level of fear. If they've never built a business, their opinion on your business idea is worth absolutely nothing. If they've never invested in real estate, their warnings about real estate are just noise. Yet most people let these uninformed opinions dictate their entire life direction. There's this fascinating study from Columbia University that tracked 250 startup founders and their susceptibility to external opinions. The founders who went on to build million-dollar companies scored extremely low on what researchers called opinion sensitivity. They'd listen to feedback from mentors, experts, and customers, but completely ignored opinions from people who had no experience in what they were doing. The founders whose companies failed scored high on opinion sensitivity. They'd change their entire business model based on what their skeptical uncle said at Thanksgiving. They'd abandon projects because a coworker made a discouraging comment. One founder named Rachel had an idea for a meal prep service targeting busy professionals. She was pumped about it until she told her parents, who immediately started listing all the reasons it wouldn't work. Too much competition? People won't pay for that. What if you fail? What about your stable job? Rachel almost quit before she started. But then she remembered something her mentor told her. Never take advice from someone who hasn't achieved what you want to achieve. Her parents had worked the same corporate jobs for 30 years. They knew nothing about entrepreneurship. So she thanked them for their concern and did it anyway. 4 years later, that meal prep service was doing $2 million in annual revenue, and she'd hired both her parents to work for her. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You need to develop what Hill called a positive immunity to negative influences. Create a rule right now that you'll only accept business or financial advice from people who are where you want to be or beyond. If someone's broke, their opinion on money doesn't matter. If someone's stuck in a job they hate, their opinion on entrepreneurship doesn't matter. If someone's never invested in anything, their opinion on investments doesn't matter. This sounds harsh, but it's liberating. You can still love these people, still value them as humans, but you don't let their fear-based opinions derail your vision. Jeff Bezos was told by dozens of people that selling books online would never work, that people needed to touch and feel books before buying them. He ignored them all. Elon Musk was mocked relentlessly when he said he'd make electric cars cool and land rockets vertically. He ignored the mockery and kept building. Sarah Blakely was told by multiple manufacturers that her Spanx idea was stupid and would never sell. She ignored them and became a billionaire. But wait, if ignoring uninformed opinions is so important for success, why do we spend our entire lives being taught to listen to authority figures and follow the advice of people older than us, regardless of their actual results? The most powerful technique I saved for last is coming up, and it has to do with how you think about time differently than everyone else. Here's where things get really interesting. If you're destined for wealth, you've probably got this nagging feeling that trading your time for money is a trap, even if you can't fully articulate why yet. You look at people working 40 years at a job, getting their 2 weeks vacation, retiring at 65 with a pension if they're lucky, and something inside you screams that this can't be the only way. Napoleon Hill discovered that every wealthy person understood a principle that poor people never grasp. The rich use leverage, the poor use time. What's leverage? It's getting more output than you put in. It's making money while you sleep. It's building systems that work whether you're there or not. The broke mindset says, I'll work harder, put in more hours, hustle 80 hours a week. The wealth mindset says, how can I build something once that pays me forever? How can I use other people's time, other people's money, other people's skills to multiply my results? Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research studied income patterns across 5,000 professionals over 15 years. The people who stayed in traditional employment, trading time for money, hit an income ceiling around $150K to $200K max, and that's if they climbed to senior positions. The people who built leverage through businesses, investments, or intellectual property had no ceiling. Some made millions, some made tens of millions, a few made hundreds of millions. The key difference was leverage. There was this accountant named David who was making $90K a year. Decent money, but he was maxed out. He couldn't work more hours. He was already at 50 hours a week. His income was capped by time. Then he had a realization. What if instead of doing accounting himself, he hired other accountants and took a percentage of their billings? What if he created online courses teaching basic accounting to small business owners? What if he wrote a book that kept selling while he slept? He started implementing leverage, hired 3 accountants, and took 20% of their revenue, created a course that sold for $500 and made sales 24 hours a day, wrote a book that brought in passive royalties. Within 3 years, he went from $90K to $680K annually, and he was working fewer hours than before because the leverage was doing the heavy lifting. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. You need to audit your current income and ask yourself how much of it requires your physical presence and time. If the answer is 100%, you're in trouble. Start building leverage today. If you have a skill, create a digital product teaching that skill. Record it once, sell it forever. If you have money saved, invest it in assets that appreciate or generate cash flow, real estate, dividend stocks, index funds. If you have a service business, systematize it so you can hire people to deliver the service while you focus on growth. Hill said the way to wealth is to put your money to work, so you don't have to work for money. Rockefeller didn't get rich by working more hours than everyone else. He got rich by owning oil wells that pumped 24 hours a day. Carnegie didn't get rich by making steel with his bare hands. He got rich by owning steel mills run by thousands of workers. Bezos didn't get rich by packing Amazon boxes himself. He got rich by building a system that operates globally without his direct involvement. Every wealthy person has figured out how to divorce their income from their time. But wait, if leverage is so obviously the path to wealth, why do schools teach us to get good grades so we can get a good job where we trade 40 years of our time for a paycheck? Here's a sign that's so obvious once you see it, but most people are completely blind to. Wealthy people think in decades, poor people think in days. You're probably destined for riches if you've noticed yourself making decisions based on where you'll be in 5 or 10 years, not where you'll be Friday night. The average person is thinking about what feels good right now. They'll finance a $50K truck because it makes them feel successful today, even though it'll keep them broke for the next 6 years. They'll skip investing $500 a month because they want to spend it on clothes and dinners out this week, not understanding that $500 a month invested from age 25 to 65 becomes over $1.2 million at a modest 8% return. Napoleon Hill talked about this in terms of definiteness of purpose with a time horizon. The successful person knows exactly where they want to be in 20 years and makes every decision through that lens. The unsuccessful person doesn't even know where they want to be next year. There's research from Yale University that studied temporal discounting, which is just a fancy way of saying how people value future rewards versus immediate rewards. They found that people who could vividly imagine their future selves and make decisions to benefit that future person earned 400% more over their lifetime than people who only focused on present moment satisfaction. The people who think long-term will live in a smaller apartment for 5 years to save money for a down payment on an investment property. The people who think short-term will get the expensive apartment now because it feels good and impresses people. 5 years later, the long-term thinker owns a rental property generating passive income. The short-term thinker has nothing but memories of a nice apartment and maybe some Instagram photos. There was this couple, James and Maria, who made a radical decision when they got married. Instead of having a big expensive wedding, they spent $3K on a small ceremony and invested the $27K they saved into dividend-paying stocks. Their friends thought they were cheap and weird. 10 years later, that $27K investment had grown to over $90K and was generating $3,600 a year in dividends. Their friends who had the fancy weddings had nothing but photos and debt. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. Start making every financial decision through the lens of your future self. Before you buy anything over $100, ask yourself, will my future self thank me for this or resent me for this? If you're thinking about buying a new iPhone when your current one works fine, your future self would probably rather you invested that $1,000. If you're thinking about buying a new car when you could drive your current car for another 3 years, your future self would probably rather you put that monthly car payment into index funds. Warren Buffett still lives in the house he bought in 1958 for $31,500, not because he can't afford better, but because he's always thinking long-term about where money can work hardest. Every dollar he didn't spend on lifestyle inflation was a dollar he could invest and compound for decades. Charlie Munger drove the same car for over 20 years. They're not cheap, they're long-term thinkers. But wait, if thinking long-term creates wealth, why is our entire economy built on getting you to spend money right now with easy financing, buy now, pay later, and constant advertisements for instant gratification? Here's the final sign that separates the future wealthy from the permanently broke. And it's all about what you're actually doing with your time at work. Most people have jobs. They show up, do what they're told, collect a check, and go home. They're not learning, they're not growing, they're not building skills that will increase their market value. They're just trading time for money in the most basic way possible. But if you're destined for wealth, you look at every job, every project, every task as an opportunity to build a skill that makes you more valuable. Napoleon Hill called this going the extra mile, doing more than you're paid to do. But it's not about being a sucker who works for free. It's about strategically building capabilities that will pay you back 100x in the future. You're the person who volunteers for the hard projects nobody else wants because you know you'll learn something. You're staying late not to kiss ass, but to figure out how the systems work. You're asking questions, taking notes, studying the successful people in your industry. There's a study from McKinsey that tracked 1,000 professionals over 20 years and found something incredible. The people who focused on skill acquisition, deliberately learning new high-value skills every year, increased their income 12% annually on average. The people who just showed up and did their job saw income increases of only 2 to 3% annually, barely keeping up with inflation. Over 20 years, that's the difference between making $60K and making $380K in the same amount of time. One guy named Alex started as a customer service rep, making $32K a year. He could have just answered phones for the next decade, and maybe worked his way up to senior customer service rep, making $45K. Instead, he used every call as a chance to learn about sales, marketing, and customer psychology. He studied the top performers, recorded his calls to analyze what worked, read books on persuasion. Within 2 years, he'd moved to sales, making $85K. Then he learned digital marketing and moved to a marketing role, making $120K. Then he learned funnel building and started a consulting business on the side, making an extra $150K. 7 years after starting as a $32K customer service rep, he was making $270K because he focused on skills, not just showing up. And here's the part that's going to change everything for you. Identify the 3 highest value skills in your industry or the industry you want to be in. Could be copywriting, could be sales, could be data analysis, could be project management, doesn't matter. Commit to becoming excellent at those 3 skills over the next 18 months. Read books specifically about those skills. Guys like Daniel Pink for sales, Cal Newport for deep work, Robert Cialdini for persuasion. Watch tutorials, take courses, find mentors who have those skills. The goal isn't to be mediocre at 20 things. It's to be exceptional at 3 things that the market values highly. Hill said that the person who masters specialized knowledge in a valuable area can write their own paycheck. Bill Gates mastered coding at a time when almost nobody understood computers. That skill built Microsoft. Oprah mastered connecting with audiences emotionally. That skill built a media empire. Gary Vaynerchuk mastered social media marketing before most people knew what it was. That skill built VaynerMedia. But wait, if building valuable skills is the path to wealth, why do most people spend their free time watching TV and scrolling social media instead of learning things that could 10x their income? Now you might be thinking, these signs are great, but I don't have all 10 of them. Does that mean I'm doomed to stay broke? Absolutely not. Here's what most people don't understand about these signs. They're not things you either have or don't have. They're things you can develop. Napoleon Hill didn't just document the traits of wealthy people. He figured out the exact methods to install these traits in anyone willing to do the work. You can engineer a burning desire through repetition and visualization. You can train yourself to make faster decisions. You can build unshakable faith through daily affirmations. You can become a learning addict by committing to 1 hour of education daily. You can increase your discomfort tolerance through voluntary hardship. You can reframe failure by keeping a lessons learned journal. You can rewire your response to others' success by practicing genuine celebration. You can become immune to opinions by only accepting advice from people with results. You can build leverage by creating systems and using other people's time or money. You can shift to long-term thinking by visualizing your future self. You can focus on skill building by deliberately practicing high-value capabilities. Drop in the comments which of these 10 signs you already have and which one you're going to work on developing first. I answer everyone who engages because I'm genuinely curious about your journey. Now you have the exact framework that Napoleon Hill discovered after studying 500 millionaires for 25 years. These aren't theories or motivational fluff. These are observable patterns that show up in people before they get rich. The question isn't whether these signs predict wealth. The data proves they do. The question is whether you're willing to develop them in yourself. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to keep learning about the psychology of wealth and success, because I'm going to be breaking down the specific techniques Hill documented for installing each of these traits into your subconscious mind. Comment below which of these 10 signs you're going to focus on developing this month. Tell me your biggest challenge with it, and I'll give you specific action steps to overcome it. This is where most people stop. They learn the information. They nod along. They feel inspired for about 20 minutes. Then they go right back to their old patterns and wonder why nothing changes. Don't be that person. Pick one sign from this list, just one, and commit to developing it for the next 30 days. Track your progress. Notice what shifts in your life when you start thinking and acting like someone who's destined for wealth instead of someone who's resigned to struggle. The wealthy aren't special. They're not lucky. They're not born different. They just develop these 10 patterns of thought and behavior that compound into extraordinary results over time. You can do the same starting today, or you can keep doing what you've always done and keep getting what you've always gotten. The choice is yours, but I'm telling you right now, your future self is watching this decision, and they're either going to thank you or resent you based on what you do next.